Happy Monday. Welcome back to the Liz Wheeler Show. If you guys haven't subscribed already, would you go ahead and do that? Go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, go to youtube.com/Liz Wheeler, rumble.com/Liz Wheeler, whatever your platform of choice is, and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode of our show. So I got to tell you guys, I'm not huge on corporate boycotts, and I never have been. I was thinking about this today because I'm making an exception to my rule. I think we should boycott a certain corporation, but historically, I've been kind of opposed to it when conservatives have boycotted, and I'll tell you why. This goes back like a decade and a half ago when I first started getting into political activism, and you guys are gonna laugh at me, but I used to shop often at Kohl's. Very fashionable clothes for a teenager there in my heyday. I used to shop at Kohl's a lot, and Kohl's the corporation started donating to Planned Parenthood, just like undercover. And this was like the first clue that a lot of us had that some of these corporations were really bought into wokeism. And there were some conservatives who even made a list at the time. I forget which group did this, but they made a list at the time of corporations where it was safe to shop or stores where it was safe to shop. Target was not one of them. Kohl's was not one of them. And I remember there were some conservatives who said, I'm not going to shop at Kohl's anymore because the corporate Kohl's donates kind of undercover to Planned Parenthood. And I remember thinking to myself at that time, I am never going to do that. I am never going to boycott Kohl's because indirectly they donate to Planned Parenthood. And this is coming from someone who the first time or the first thing that I did to dip my toe into political activism was to do pro-life activism. Pro-life activism was, I mean, it still is one of the things I'm the most passionate about, but it was the thing that I did in late high school and early college. And even that, being passionately and entirely pro-life, I was like, well, I'm not going to do that because this was my justification. The amount of time that I would have to invest to boycott Kohl's, meaning everything that I got at Kohl's, whether it was jewelry or shoes or clothes or boots or whatever it was, I would have to find from some other store, which means it would take me a long time to figure out which sizes and which brands fit, and it would be a time investment to give up Kohl's. And I thought to myself, the opportunity cost of doing that is not worth it if I spend the amount of time that I could have spent, I would have spent had I boycotted Kohl's doing direct pro-life activism. That is more damaging to Planned Parenthood's mission than me boycotting Kohl's because they donate indirectly or because they donate, the corporate aspect of it donates to Planned Parenthood. So that long journey down memory lane is one of the reasons why I've never been a huge fan of corporate boycotts. I usually think that we have more impact if we do direct activism than if we say, well, you know what, I'm not going to shop at Target because of XYZ. However, I'm breaking my rule today. This has finally crossed the line for me, and I think we should, in fact, boycott this. Budweiser, has announced their new spokesperson, and it's Dylan Mulvaney.
Hi. Impressive carrying skills, right? I got some Bud Lights for us. So, I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sports. And I'm not sure exactly which sport, but either way, it's a cause to celebrate. This month, I celebrated my day 365 of womanhood, and Bud Light sent me possibly the best gift ever, a can with my face on it. Check out my Instagram story to see how you can enjoy March Madness with Bud Light and maybe win some money too. Love ya! Cheers! Go team! Whatever team you love, I love too. Okay. Love ya. Okay, break a leg. Woo!
Okay, first of all, even besides the ideology that Dylan Mulvaney is pushing, I find Dylan Mulvaney to be one of the most annoying people on planet Earth. I do not understand how he has gained over 10 million followers on TikTok and almost 2 million followers on Instagram. The most annoying person on the face of this earth. But as you can see, Dylan Mulvaney, this quote-unquote transgender individual, there's no such thing as a transgender person. There's either a man or a woman. But Dylan Mulvaney was born a man and now dresses like a woman, had surgery to make his face look more like a woman, but really just a little bit more like Bruce Jenner, not really like a real woman here. Dylan Mulvaney is the spokesperson for Budweiser, and they sent a can of beer to his house with his face on it. He showed it on that video. We can show it again on the screen here. And I gotta tell you, I saw this, and this is just beyond the pale to me. Beyond the pale to me. They are honoring Budweiser. Bud Light is honoring Dylan Mulvaney as if Dylan Mulvaney is a woman. Dylan Mulvaney has done nothing that women do. Dylan Mulvaney has made TikTok videos for 365 days talking about having emotional breakdowns and sending emails and wearing lipstick and prancing around fields in sports bras and high heels. No woman that I know does that. And yet Budweiser chooses to honor Dylan Mulvaney as a woman. Budweiser, how about you send a beer to a woman who has birthed 5 children and is raising them, who runs her own business and cooks and cleans and cares for her family and doesn't get enough sleep and doesn't have time to put on makeup and get all dolled up as often as she would like because she's sacrificially taking care of her family, her husband, and her children. How about you honor a woman like that? A real woman. Instead of this man who wears eyeshadow and got plastic surgery and prances around pretending that he's a woman. I cannot with Budweiser. I cannot with Bud Light. I told my husband about this and he was like, yep, we're done. No more Budweiser, no more Bud Light. This is why I'm breaking my rule. This is why my old opinion on corporate boycotts doesn't apply to this anymore. Because this is a fundamental threat to our society. This is one of the questions that I want to talk about with you today, because in the wake of the Nashville shooting that was carried out by that transgender maniac, there have been a lot of transgender activists who have said, well, why do you care? Why do you conservatives care? Why do you care if people are transgender? Why do you care if people have surgery? Why do you care about this? Why are you trying to ban this? And I think it's very, very important that we answer that question directly. So I have a simply horrible video to show you in just a second of another transgender activist violently assaulting someone who is speaking up for reality. And I want to take a minute and answer that question, why we as conservatives, why we must care about this issue. So let's get to it. All right, guys, I want to tell you about Genucel. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of skincare products out there, so let me cut right to the chase and tell you about the one that I like the best. It's called Genucel. And sure, by the way, you can go to Brazil or Colombia and you can get crazy stuff done to your face, but why on earth would you do that? Let me read you what a woman named Claire wrote to me. She said, I absolutely love Genucel. My skin feels so good, tighter, younger, with more even tone, and I only used it for a week. My advice for everyone is take a before picture. It's true, Genucel is a family recipe made by a compounding pharmacist in small batches. It's always safe, it's cruelty-free, it's natural. Right now, you can go to Genucel.com and save over 70% off Genucel's most popular package. It features their ultra retinol and their dark spot corrector. Don't wait. Go to Genucel.com/Liz. That's Genucel.com/Liz. All orders are upgraded to free shipping, and every subscription order includes a complimentary spring spa box with 3 spa essentials, also free. It is for a limited time, so go to Genucel.com/Liz. That's GENUCEL.com/Liz. Genucel.com/Liz. Okay, so we're going to answer that question. Why should conservatives care? Why is this so important to, for example, constantly be talking about Dylan Mulvaney on this show? It's not that we just want to talk about this guy. It's not that we want to watch his videos. He's super annoying. I'd prefer if I never had to see another video of Dylan Mulvaney for the rest of my life, but we have to watch it. We have to analyze it. We have to talk about it, and we have to care because Billboard Chris, you guys probably remember Billboard Chris. I interviewed him. We talked to him on this show a couple months ago. I want to say maybe 3-4 months ago. We talked to Billboard Chris. We did a long form interview. It was before Billboard Chris had gained the prominence that he has now, but like his name suggests, Billboard Chris is the guy that goes around he stands outside sometimes hospitals that do transition surgeries, transgender surgeries. He stands outside gender clinics. He stands in political areas. So he stood outside the Supreme Court once. He goes to state capitals when the state legislatures are debating bills that would ban transgender surgeries or puberty blocking hormones or cross-sex hormones. And he went to the Trans Day of Visibility wearing a big sandwich board on the front. And his sandwich board usually says men cannot be women. Sometimes it says a father is someone who protects their children from transgender ideology. He says the basic science. His billboard always has a text. It's not incendiary text. It's just text that makes a proposition, like puberty blocking drugs are dangerous for children. And he sparks conversations with people. we talked about this when I had him on the show. He talked about all the amazing conversations he's had with people who didn't know that the puberty blocking pharmaceutical drugs that the left presents as just being a pause on puberty are actually drugs that are not FDA approved for young children, not FDA approved for gender dysphoria, and they're actually the same drug that's used to chemically castrate convicted sex offenders in some states. People don't know that, and he's sparked amazing conversations with people. He's also been met with violent transgender activists, as he was this weekend when he went to Canada's. He's from Canada, by the way, although he travels the United States as well. When he went to Canada's Trans Day of Visibility rally, he stood on the outskirts of this rally. It was it looked like it was in a field, a park in the middle of the town. He wore his sandwich board, and he got violently assaulted twice. The first time he was violently assaulted, a radical transgender activist came up and punched him in the face and gave him a bloody nose. I will spare you that video because, there's blood. The second time he's assaulted by a man who identifies as a woman, but just wait till you hear this individual's voice and wait until you see the strength of this hulking man who is pretending that he is a woman. Take a look at this.
Why do you think they're getting that kind of representation? I mean, it's clearly was aggressive violence.
You suck. You suck. You. You're not wanted. You're a fucking idiot. You're a fucking
I don't know what to say. These police officers are mostly indoctrinated as well. They're afraid of the mob.
Because you're a fucking idiot.
They're afraid they do anything to keep law and order. They'll be the end of this abuse. So it's cowardice from everybody all around.
They'll probably want to. How do you keep your composure?
What?
How do you keep composure?
For those of you just listening to this now, the transgender activists are converging around Billboard Chris. He's wearing a sandwich board that says children cannot consent. They grabbed him by the throat and threw him to the ground. We bleeped it all out so you couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but they're saying F you to him as they got right up in his face. He was doing a media interview. As you can see, his sandwich board says children cannot consent, meaning they cannot give their consent to hormonal transition and surgical transition. And that big hulking dude with the blonde hair and earrings and lipstick violently assaulted Billboard Chris. He texted me right after this happened because I'd sent him a text and I was like, are you okay? This looks pretty bad. I mean, he had a bloody nose first and he was like, yeah, I'm okay. But the police response to this, he said, was unreal. You could see in that video in the background, there were police standing by. And when I say standing by, I mean literally standing by. They had their hands in their pockets. They were just kind of observing what was going on. They could see that these radical, angry, hulking transgender activists were getting right up in Billboard Chris's face, but they didn't do anything about it. In fact, Billboard Chris was violently hurled to the ground before police did anything. And even then, they just handed the transgender activist back his purse. They did not arrest him. They did not question him. They did absolutely nothing about that. And Billboard Chris confronted police about this, which we're going to see in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about Donors Trust. We're sponsored today by Donors Trust. You can go to donorstrust.org/Liz. They're the principled, tax-friendly way to simplify your charitable giving. Listen, we as conservatives, we appreciate and support private charity, right? We don't want big daddy government taking our money, deciding what they want to do with it. We want to decide how to give of ourselves and the fruits of our labor, our money, ourselves. So that being said, we are now at the worst time of year, tax season, when the government takes our money and chooses what to do with it. But if you, like me, want your hard-earned dollars going to private charity instead of the greedy federal government, I highly encourage you to open a giving account with Donors Trust. Here's how it works. First, you establish your account with Donors Trust. Then through the account, you or your family can recommend grants to public charities. All contributions to the account are immediately tax deductible and as such are legally controlled by the organization that offers it. You may make grant recommendations to a variety of local or national nonprofit organizations at any time throughout the life of your account. Giving accounts are tax advantaged and they're anonymous, which is great. They also make filing taxes simpler because Donors Trust takes care of the paperwork. Instead of digging up receipts ahead of tax day, Donors Trust givers are free to focus on their charitable goals. So whether you want to give to charities fighting woke gender ideology or saving unborn babies or pushing back against government overreach, discover whether Donors Trust is the giving account provider for you. Visit donorstrust.org/Liz. That's donorstrust.org/Liz. So after Billboard Chris has been violently assaulted twice by radical transgender activists. The first time he was punched in the face, it gave him a bloody nose. The second time, this hulking transgender dude who identifies as transgender, grabs him by the neck and throws him to the ground in the middle of this crowd, this frothing at the mouth. Police did nothing to protect Billboard Chris, and he goes up and asks the police officers, like, hey, what's going on here? And their reaction is quite shocking. Take a look.
Listen, I love the police. My brother's a police officer. I respect law and order. I respect our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I'm not trying to be a jerk to you earlier today. I don't think a lot of you understand what I'm actually representing
right on, mister. Thank you
and
so
the
much
seriousness
for
of this
being
situation. But it is what it is, I guess. This is Canada, and people shouldn't be allowed to assault people without consequence,
I agree,
you know?
Chris, but the thing is, right, when we get into people's faces and they get into our faces, it doesn't really matter who does the first push. It's considered a consensual fight, and maybe that's something you should.
I didn't get into people's faces. I was
Chris,
here
I
for.
saw
You
get
weren't.
very close to people.
You weren't here.
And
You weren't even here.
I was.
I came and walked.
They
I
surrounded.
I came over to your car.
Yes, that first time,
After.
but the second time,
They
The second
surrounded
time,
him.
what?
when you were pushed on the ground.
Are you kidding me? I'd been walking away from them
Yeah, and they surrounded.
to do an interview with him. They came close. I walked away
Okay.
again to do the interview with
All I'm
him.
saying is, at this point, maybe
They
you
surrounded-
should ask your brother what a consensual fight is, right?
Oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. I walked away from them 3 times. They were surrounding me. You all were doing nothing. A man yelled in my ear from inches away, and I tried to get out of this situation where they're surrounding me while you guys do nothing, and I immediately get punched in the face. And you're blaming me?
And whoever punched you should be charged.
Are you kidding me right now?
Okay, Chris.
This is totally surreal. I cannot believe what I'm hearing.
It's all your fault.
Amazing.
It's surreal.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Totally amazing.
Okay. Well,
Do you even know what like, why are you behaving like this? Do you think I'm evil or something for having this position? Like, what's your problem?
Yeah.
You're trying to insinuate that was a mutual thing. Like, my gosh, mutual thing. I'd walked away from the crowd 3 times. They kept following me. Then they surrounded me from all sides, started yelling in my ear from inches away while you all did nothing. And then when I can't even get out of that surrounding and I get punched in the face, I get pulled, you're telling me that's a mutual engagement?
Yes, it is. Well, you have the
Incredible.
Right, you have the right not to be here either.
It's incredible.
Right?
And I have the right to be here.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
you do.
Have you
But-
read this thing called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms?
Yes, I have.
Have you?
Yes, I
You
have.
should go home and read it again.
Unreal. So you saw in that first video what Billboard Chris was doing when he was violently assaulted. He was doing a media interview. He was standing face to face with a reporter who happened to be on his side, right? So this wasn't a contentious interview, happened to share his viewpoints. Billboard Chris was giving this interview, and transgender activists deliberately came over and got in his face. This was not a mutual conflict. This was not a mutually agreed upon fight. And this police officer said, it really doesn't matter who gives the first push. I think it does. I think that's critically important in a violent assault. Who is the assailant and who is the victim? Unreal, unreal. Now, this is Canada. This is not the United States, but let me tell you, Canada is where some of this stuff started happening first, where wokeism, they caved a little bit more to wokeism in Canada first. They started making hate speech laws in Canada before that started encroaching on our right to free speech here in the United States. It happens first in Canada, and this is what we see. This is what we should look for. This is, not to use a cliche phrase, but this is the canary in the coal mine. how Canada reacts to this, is soon how the United States is going to react to this. And this police officer is excusing violent transgender activists who brutally assaulted Billboard Chris, and the police were standing right there, and they did nothing. Now, the Vancouver police eventually issued a response, not this particular police officer, the woman that you heard in this video, but the Vancouver police eventually released a response. I want to read you their response. It's a little bit better than the police officer's response, but still quite tepid. They say, we have launched an investigation into an incident that occurred at yesterday's trans rights rally at Grandview Park. We support everyone's right to peacefully assemble and protest, but we will also hold people accountable for acts of violence and criminal behavior. So here's what I will say to that. Great, those are very pretty words. That's the correct viewpoint to take. Now act on it. I'll believe this when I see it. I'll believe that the police are pursuing justice when I see that. They don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore after a police officer told Billboard Chris that, you didn't have to be here if you didn't want to be treated this way. That's essentially what she said. You have a right not to be here. Yes, but he has a right to be there. And his right to be there also includes the right not to be violently assaulted by a radical transgender activist. This is what I was talking about last week when I said this is queer theory. These radical transgender activists, a better way of describing them instead of saying radical transgender activists would be trans-tifa. This is Antifa, the thuggery of Antifa combined with the ideology of queer theory, the transgender ideology. They are trans-tifa. And their goal is largely the same. The goal of queer theory is not equality. It's not tolerance. It's nothing of the kind. The goal of the transgender ideology, which is just the outgrowth of queer theory, is to destabilize our society. The goal of queer theory is a Marxist revolution. The goal of queer theory is to divide society into two different factions. The faction that is labeled as oppressors and the faction that is labeled as the marginalized or the oppressed. In queer theory, these two groups are supposed to be the transgender people. The LGBTQ plus people are the oppressed people. They're the marginalized people. And their oppressors are white, male, cisgender Christians. And so queer theory is agitating for a violent confrontation between transgender, queer people and white, male, cisgender Christians. We are seeing this play out before our very eyes. And if we allow the left to, ignore the fact that the Nashville shooter was a woman who was probably on testosterone, but certainly identified as transgender, if we allow the left to relegate these multiple instances of transgender people committing violence in the name of their ideology as just lunatics that don't represent the movement, if we allow them to hide this narrative, it's just going to get worse, just like Antifa did. When we were told by the left that Antifa isn't real, Antifa is just an ideology. That's what a member of Congress told us. A Democrat member of Congress told us. What happened? Well, this quote unquote idea that wasn't real actually set up in the Pacific Northwest. They seceded from the United States. They set up their own autonomous zone with their own rules of anarchy outside of the US rule of law. And there was sexual assault, there was murder, it was an absolute garbage heap. It was anarchy. It was horrible. And we predicted it, and the left told us that it wasn't real. That's what's happening here. That's what's happening. Queer theory has not just been indoctrinating youth. We've been so focused on protecting children from the psychological and physical harm of the transgender ideology. We don't want them to be confused about whether you can be a boy if you're a girl and whether you can be a girl if you're a boy. We don't want them to be physically harmed from the puberty-blocking pharmaceuticals, the cross-sex hormones, or God forbid, the surgeries that we have neglected to recognize that it's not just these children as individuals that need to be protected. We do need to protect them, but it's also society at large, because queer theory is a violent, neo-Marxist, revolutionary ideology. What we are seeing right now is queer theory and transgender activists showing their true colors. This is what transgenderism is. It's violent, it's revolutionary, and it's Marxist. It's why it's trans-tifa. It's trans-tifa. And speaking of colors, I'm not trying to make a bad pun here. The transgender flag is light pink, light blue, and white. You've seen it. You've seen it, unfortunately, hung up at capitals in legislatures. You've seen it displayed by government buildings. You see it in almost every storefront now. They have their little badge of virtue signaling telling us that they're not just gay friendly, but that they also stand for this transgender ideology. And that flag, it stands for an ideology that's horrible and violent and revolutionary and Marxist, but it was invented by someone who is an absolute creep. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about Relief Band. You know, I've got to be totally honest with you here. When this advertiser first came to me wanting to advertise on my show, my reaction was, I don't really know if those things work. I've tried wristbands for nausea before. I have, especially when I was pregnant with my daughter or when I ride in the car because I get car sick, and none of them have ever worked. But I figured, okay, well, I'll at least give Relief Band a try. I'll always tell you when I'm wrong. And guys, I was totally wrong. Relief Band actually works. I'm happy to have them as a sponsor. Relief Band is the #1 FDA-cleared anti-nausea wristband that has been clinically proven to quickly relieve and effectively prevent nausea and vomiting associated with all kinds of things. Motion sickness, but also anxiety, migraines, hangovers, morning sickness, chemotherapy, so much more. And you can forget the days of nausea pills that make you groggy and exhausted. It's like the name says, Relief Band is legitimately a band that you wear on your wrist that gives you relief from nausea, and it uses pressure points and stuff, so you can change the intensity depending on how you're feeling, make it stronger or weaker. Relief Band actually works, it really does. I'm laughing because I didn't believe it at first, but it does. Right now, we have got an exclusive offer just for Liz Wheeler listeners. If you go to reliefband.com, you can use my promo code Liz to get 20% off, plus free shipping. So head to reliefband.com. It's RELIEF band.com. It's exactly how it sounds. And use my promo code Liz for 20% off plus free shipping. Reliefband.com, promo code Liz. So when I say the transgender ideology is showing its true colors, I'm not trying to make a bad pun. I do appreciate the pun here. It's a great transition, this part of the show. But the transgender flag is light blue, it's light pink, and white, striped. We've all seen this flag. The people or the person behind the design of this transgender flag is a man by the name of Robert Hoge, or Robert Hogge, Hogge, who now identifies as a woman by the name of Monica Helms. But Robert Hoge is not just delusional because he's a man who thinks he's a woman. He's an absolute certifiable creep and most likely a pedophile. At least, I'll couch this, he displays sympathies and appetites that would indicate that he's interested in young children sexually. Robert Hoge has written short stories about children whose bodies don't age as they age, which is an outlet for a sexual fantasy towards children. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. I'm not even going to read you any of it because it's so disturbing. When Robert was a child, he stole his mother's underwear and wore it. His mother's underwear and wore it because he thought it was exciting. This is clearly a man who has demented paraphilias. Paraphilias are persistent sexual interests in things that are abnormal. Robert Hoge is the perfect description. If there was a picture next to the definition of paraphilia, it would be Robert Hoge. This guy is an absolute creep. He was married, he had children of his own, but when his wife didn't like that he dressed up like a woman and was spending all of their money on his trans habit, she divorced him and he left all of his children. He abandoned all of his children to, quote unquote, live authentically as a woman. At his job, he made his female coworkers feel uncomfortable because he wore such short, revealing dresses and used the women's locker room. He also likes to go to clubs where he watches other people having sex through the glass windows. This is a creepo, a sicko, like an absolute pervert. This is the guy that designed the trans flag. This is the guy, this is the ideology behind the trans flag, right? It's a combination of paraphilia and pedophilia and Marxism. It's like if you took the three most disgusting, demonic ideologies that you could possibly think of and put them all in one flag, you would get the trans flag. Disgusting, demonic ideology. So that brings us, of course, to this original question of, well, why do conservatives care, right? If a grown man like this Robert Hoge guy wants to live as a total creep, as long as he's not touching children, why can't we let him do that? Why do we care? Why do we have to put up a fuss? Why do we have to ban these things if people want to do it? And I'll tell you why. This is a question that we should answer. Why do we care about the transgender ideology? There's 4 reasons why. First of all, we care about the transgender ideology. We care about debunking it because we care about truth. We care about reality. And the reality is that men cannot be women and women cannot be men. The reality is that you cannot simply choose what gender you identify with. The reality is that you are either born a man because of your body and your DNA and your brain, or you're born a woman for the same reasons. The reality is that your gender is not on a spectrum, that you don't get to choose your pronouns. The reality is that the transgender agenda is anti-scientific and anti-reality. And we, as the American people, we have to care about truth. We have to care about reality. If we don't, then we don't have a society, because society has to be based on a shared reality. And in this case, it should be easy because it's objective truth. It's not just values and opinions. The second reason that we care about the transgender ideology is because we care about people who identify as transgender. We care about people who are suffering from gender disorders. We even care about people who are suffering from paraphilias. We want them to get help. We want them to be the healthy people made in God's image that God intended them to be. We want them to address the trauma that underlies their gender dysphoria. We want them to get counseling. We want them to be healthy, functional people. We don't want to see them go down this path of having their delusions indulged, going on harmful pharmaceutical drugs and then cross-sex hormones, and then mutilating their beautiful bodies by doing something that's not even curative for the mental health issue that they were struggling with in the first place. We care about these people. We can't let this happen to them. We also care about the transgender ideology because we care about women, and women are hurt by the transgender ideology. Women are ignored. Women are obliterated. Women's achievements are being destroyed. You can look at any example of this. You can look at the NCAA Women's Swimming Championship, where a biological male with fully intact male genitalia who had competed the previous 3 years as a man won the women's category because suddenly he identified as a woman. You can look at Dylan Mulvaney and getting the sponsorship for Budweiser. What woman, some real woman, was deprived of this economic opportunity because Dylan Mulvaney, a man, is pretending to be a woman and took that opportunity from her instead? Look at USA Today, naming these women of the year. That begets opportunity as well, I would think. But biological men are taking these away from women. Women are being reduced to nothing. Biological women are being simply erased. There's no such thing as women's rights if there's transgenderism, because there's no such thing as being a woman inherently. We care about women. We have to care about the transgender ideology. We also care deeply about our nation. We care about the transgender ideology because the transgender ideology is a fundamental threat to our nation. It's not just reality. It's not just science. It's not just women's rights. We care about the transgender ideology because the transgender ideology is queer theory. Queer theory is a violent, neo-Marxist, revolutionary ideology that tells LGBTQIA+ people that they are on the verge of being exterminated, that they are about to face genocide. This ideology sparks such fear in the hearts of queer people, such anger on purpose. The ideology riles up queer people, makes them fear for their own lives so that they can exploit queer people and use them as the vanguard to start a Marxist revolution, make them so angry at straight white Christians that they'll attack them and assault them and start this revolution. And the people propagating queer theory, propagating the transgender ideology, don't care at all about queer people, because in the process of not only transitioning them and indulging their delusions, but pushing them towards violence, transgender people are being harmed. Transgender people are dying. Transgender people are harming themselves. But transgender activists and queer theorists don't care about that because all they want is a Marxist revolution. They want to destroy our country. Of course, conservatives must care about this. In fact, if you are a conservative or a Republican who doesn't care about this, then you don't understand the reality of the political enemy that we are facing in this country, and you should not be serving in office. You should not be serving in a position of leadership. You should be relegated to the sidelines so that someone who does understand what we're fighting can fight. And I have two examples that I want to give here. The first is another Republican has thrown his hat into the ring to run for president in 2024. The former governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson. Yeah, maybe you never heard of him. Maybe you have. He's not as prominent as some of the other candidates. Has announced that he will join the Republican primary. And first of all, Asa Hutchinson doesn't stand a chance because he doesn't have universal name recognition. It's always funny, and we'll save this conversation for a different show, but this is something I think often when presidential candidates who don't have universal name recognition, who aren't like young up-and-comers on their upward trajectory, when they announce for president, and I sit back and think, does this person really think that they have a chance to win the primary? Like, are they that delusional themselves that they sit here and think, oh, I can do this. I can beat Donald Trump. I can beat Ron DeSantis. I can win this thing, even though no one knows who I am. I'm old. I'm not that conservative, but yeah, by golly, I can do it. It's an interesting psychological and egotistical exploration, I think, to analyze why people think, because most people that run for president will not secure the nomination and actually run for president. They won't advance past the primary. The vast majority, only one person can win. So like, these people think it's them? Again, we'll save that for another show, but Asa Hutchinson definitely falls into that category. But the first thing that he did was call for President Trump to drop out of the primary. Take a listen to this.
You suggested recently that if Trump were to get indicted, that he should drop out of the race. Do you believe that now that he's been indicted, should he drop out?
Well, I do. First of all, the office is more important than any individual person. And so for the sake of the office of the presidency, I do think that's too much of a sideshow and distraction, and he needs to be able to concentrate on his due process, and there is a presumption of innocence. But the second reason is, throughout my 8 years as governor and as a political leader, I've always said that people don't have to step aside from public office if they're under investigation. But if it reaches the point of criminal charges that have to be answered, the office is always more important than a person.
And he should step aside and no longer run.
Well, he should, but at the same time, we know he's not. And there's not any constitutional requirement. And so he's going to pursue, and I understand that, but I stated my principles and belief and how I think it should be handled. But he's going to proceed on, and so he's going to be a candidate. And I think ultimately the voters are going to have to decide this.
Okay, first of all, that's stupid. Again, not to verge into just plain political commentary here, although we have plenty of it on this guy. If you actually operated under the premise that Asa Hutchinson is suggesting, then all it would do is give Democrats incentive to levy false allegations at candidates and weaponize district attorneys, prosecutors, to bring charges against candidates just because it would force the candidate to step aside and quote unquote focus on due process. Dumbest thing I've ever heard. That, however, is not why I bring Asa Hutchinson up today, though. I bring him up because when he was governor, he's bragging about this 8 years that he served as governor of Arkansas, he vetoed a bill that would have banned transgender surgeries for children. Banned them. The reason why, I'm going to read you this quote exactly. Let me pull it up, actually. He said, it's too extreme. He said, my own view is that this bill, which was passed by the Arkansas Senate 25-8, and then by the House 72-25, so wild majority in the Arkansas legislature. He said, my own personal view is that this is too extreme. It was too broad and did not grandfather in those young people who are currently under hormone treatment. He then, once this bill, by the way, became law because the legislature overrode his veto, he spoke directly to trans youth, quote unquote trans youth, and said, I'm sorry. He apologized to trans youth. This guy wants to be president of the United States. He wants to be the Republican nominee. I don't think so. I don't think so. He said, what's next? Disciplining laws about parents disciplining their children? Yeah, actually, we already have those on the books because we all universally acknowledge that parental rights, while nearly absolute, do not include the right to abuse your children. That includes transgender surgeries on children because it mutilates and abuses their bodies, and they are not old enough to consent to that. But Asa Hutchinson says, no, that's too extreme and it's too broad, and he apologized to youth. If you do not have an accurate idea of the reality of the political enemy that we're facing, if you cannot look at transgender activists and understand that transgender activists are the embodiment of queer theory, and queer theory is a violent, neo-Marxist, revolutionary ideology, then why on earth would anyone vote for you? Why should we vote for you? We are fighting back against something so inherently evil that you have to be able to come to grips with what that is. You have to show us you have the courage to fight back against it. Otherwise, what on earth are you doing? This is actually the same as what's happening in Congress. So Congress is debating right now this bill about this piece of legislation that would ban TikTok. And don't get me wrong, I'm completely in favor of banning TikTok. I was one of the first people to suggest that this was necessary. The bill itself that Congress is debating absolutely sucks. It's essentially a Patriot Act all over again. It's an invasion of privacy and a power grab by the federal government, the likes that we've almost never seen before in this country. Instead of just saying, hey, this is a bill that hereby bans TikTok because it is an information operation of the Chinese Communist Party and it is owned by an entity tied to the Chinese Communist Party. Therefore, for the security of our nation and our people, we prohibit this application from being used in the United States. That's all it takes. Literally all it takes. 2 sentences. Bam. Done. You're welcome. Instead, what this bill does is it allows the government to seize your phone and to seize your computer and to seize all your data just in this vague name of national security. Well, that sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? This is exactly how the whole intelligence community apparatus, this deep state apparatus, got so out of hand because they gave themselves these broad sweeping powers and they abused it. So I wholeheartedly support banning TikTok, but I do not support this bill. But even so, many of these Republicans who are in favor of this terrible bill don't understand the threat of TikTok. They think TikTok's just addictive. It's not good for children. We should have an age limit, all kinds of silly things. They think, oh, TikTok is harvesting your email address and your birth date so they can sell it to advertisers. That's a violation of privacy. No. That is not why TikTok is dangerous. Because honestly, all social media companies do that. Facebook does that. Instagram does that. YouTube does that. Twitter, maybe in pre-Elon Musk days, did that. Social media companies always harvest your personal data, and the younger generations don't care about that. Millennials, Gen Z, don't really care if their email address is sold. They probably don't even know. It's something we grew up with. You can make the argument that it's wrong, but I'm just telling you for a fact that young people don't care about that. That is not why TikTok is dangerous. TikTok is dangerous because they create a map of your brain. It's not based on your email address. It's not based on what websites you visit because they want to send you a targeted ad. TikTok builds a map of your brain, identifying characteristics like, oh, you're a 14-year-old boy and you're gay, but you haven't told anybody. You feel unloved because you are afraid to tell your parents because they think you might reject you. You desperately want someone to love you and you're starting to dive online into things that are just a little bit creepy sexually. So what does TikTok do? TikTok will serve that person. This is just an example. TikTok will serve that person a video of Jeffrey Marsh, that guy that we're pretty sure is a pedophile because he pushes this idea on children that they should go no contact with their parents, this non-binary freak that we've talked about on the show. Or maybe they identify, oh, you know what? You're a middle-aged white woman. You're kind of fat, kind of discontented with your life. You want to feel special. You teach in a public school. That's what you do for a living. They make a map of everything about you, and then they say, you know what? This person is right for critical race theory. Let's see if we can get her to confess to white privilege and white complicity and white guilt. Let's see if we can have her buy into this neo-Marxist ideology. The same with queer theory. They think, oh, okay, well, what are you? You're a 13-year-old girl who maybe you were abused by an adult male. You feel uncomfortable in your body. You don't have a father figure around to protect you. And so what do? They start serving you videos of Dylan Mulvaney, who's so happy now that Dylan Mulvaney has transitioned genders. This is what TikTok does. It's not data harvesting and data collection. It's manipulation of you. They want to change the way your mind thinks. They want to change your children. This is the danger of TikTok. And if we don't understand that, TikTok is going to continue to groom younger generations that are going to turn into trans Tifa. The reason we didn't have trans Tifa 10 years ago is because we didn't have the widespread apparatus of indoctrination through public school classrooms and through TikTok. The United States Congress can get rid of this with one sentence, one bill that doesn't also fundamentally violate our privacy and our rights at the same time. Queer theory is so dangerous. It's Marxist, it's revolutionary, it's radical, it's violent. What happened to Billboard Chris will happen to more people if we don't put our foot down and say, stop. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.